This is greytFM, a podcast series by greytHR, produced by Timber Media.
From the time I was in college to when I entered my second year of work, HR took on a completely different meaning. And the reason I bring up college, I know that might seem random, is that because when I was first exposed to it, it was brought to me as the idea of the folks who keep your company in order, and that's kind of where it stopped. But being able to host this podcast series, welcome back to greytFM, everyone. And having worked so closely with HR teams in my line of work, it's plain to see that the role of HR has evolved tremendously and also has the potential to go much further. We've explored different aspects of this evolution and will continue to do so. So today, as we observe HR Professionals Day, we're bringing together a few speakers from the world of HR to unpack all of that potential. And I'm really quite excited for today's podcast because this is the first time we're bringing the power of three to greytFM. Please welcome Aravind Warrier, HR lead Volvo Group, Jitender Panihar, CHRO Fitelo, and Meenalochani Kumar, advisor Sigmoid. Hi, all of you. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Alia, humbled and honored.
Pleasure is all ours. Hi, Meena. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks. Much grateful. Thank you very much, Ahalya.
Hi, Jitender. Thank you so very much for being with us today. How are you?
Thank you, Alia. Doing very well. And it's a pleasure. Look forward to an interesting chat.
All right, so let's dive straight in. I think I want to kick things off in an experiential fashion, right? We were talking about this evolution. So let me, extend the first question to all of you. Tell us about the first moment you felt like an HR professional and what that kind of represented for you. Meena, if you want to take this one first.
Perfect. And it's a very reflective question because it took me back several years, way back to 2004, when I was probably in the mid to senior level in HR. And then I had to fast forward to somewhere around 2018. And it was an ordinary day. I was visiting a mall with my family, and suddenly I heard my name being shouted out. And I turned to see a young man, and he came rushing to me and he said, "I know you don't remember me, Meena, but you were the one who hired me at company X. And I must tell you that life has taken a huge change for me. And right now I am the vice president of a business unit there."
Wow.
I stood there quite surprised with a mixed bag of emotions. And he said, "My family has come a long way because of that one incident." And that is the day I think it took me back to the feeling that HR can play such a brilliant role, not only in the professional lives of people, but also in the personal space that people have in their lives. And when I saw your question, it flooded me with that memory, Ahalya.
I love that. And I'm so very glad we're starting off with that question, simply because, that's the thing. I feel, interestingly enough, HR, human resources, right? But we tend to forget the humane aspects of this role. I think this also brings about, what you value the most about the job. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Aravind, if you'd like to share your, moment, your reflection on when you first felt like an HR professional and what that meant for you going ahead in your career.
Thanks for that brilliant question, Alia. I just have one reflection from my stint in one of the great organizations I worked. There was an instance where one of the candidates who was actually whom I hired was a software engineer. Then he became a senior software engineer in 2 years. Very potential candidate. What had happened to him is soon after senior software engineer, there was an assessment. Assessment is either you become a project lead where you have the people aspect coming in. Another was the technical lead. This is where he had approached me asking, "Aravind, can you just come for a walk? I have something to ask." So I told him, okay. He started asking me, see, the assessment is nearing. And at least in my mind, I feel I'm a technical guy. Then I started asking, why do you feel so? Because he was saying, going back the whole journey in his school days also, I was not a person so studious. And the whole thing was around the technology or the technology aspect, learning and unlearning a lot of technology. That's excited him. Now, since he's going to have a transition in his life, he was asking, "Aravind, what should I do?" So the best thing I told him is, what you can do is basically go back, take a piece of paper, write your strengths, and then see where do you fit, either the technical side or the project side. So what he did is the whole night he was reflecting on his strengths. And finally, the whole thing, it was just anchoring around the technical side. And then keeping that in mind, he really went ahead and nominated himself for the technical side. He was able to crack it. and now he's a senior head in one of the greatest companies in this India. So I feel this is where I was able to create an impact in someone's life, because more than anything, if you can really help someone build their careers, that's where HR really makes a difference. I think more than anything, if you can make someone reflect, if you can just make someone think on their own strengths and capabilities, that's where HR can definitely make a big difference. These are my thoughts.
Awesome, Aravind. And I think it really gives us a lot of context to take this conversation forward. So, Jitender, also to come to you now, to ask you about that moment that first represents being an HR professional for you. Is that a vivid memory that you have? Was it very early on in your career, or did it happen a little bit later on? I think it's interesting to sort of get your reflections on that.
So I think my tryst with HR happened by chance, and it was a classical case of serendipity. But I think once I got into the profession, I've had multiple reflections which ensured that the reason why, I picked up HR kind of stayed true. So during my times with consulting, I got multiple opportunities wherein, I worked with HR professionals, by being on the other side of the table. And that is where my, belief in being an HR professional and the function became much more stronger. And being a consultant, I saw quite a bit of misses. There were several gaps. And, once you see things from an outside perspective, you get a lot more deeper in terms of what you can bring to the table. And I think that's where, as an HR professional, I realized that, okay, this is where, I want to be, the kind of value that I want to create, the kind of contribution I can make as an HR professional makes much more sense.
That's such a wonderful reflection, Jitender. And, also to see that serendipity does always play a role in our lives and also helps make the best decisions sometimes. I also would really like to get your views on what is that one opportunity or aspect of work. So much of this conversation revolves around the evolution of HR. So in your own experience, do you believe that there's a very unique opportunity for HR professionals world over to really tap into something that is ripe for the picking that you believe everyone should keep their eyes on?
Absolutely, Leah. And I believe, as an HR professional, the function does not just have one opportunity. There is an opportunity to be a 360-degree player. And when I say, being a 360-degree player, that means not just picking up a functional hat, but also picking up, a hat, which is of a problem solver, someone who can create massive impact. Now, that impact might come from being a business partner. That impact might come from being a great HR analytics guy. That impact might come from, being a culture architect. So I would see it from the lens of value, see it from the lens of impact, and see it from the lens of problem solving. And that's where I believe that rather than picking up any one role, any one skill, I think it's a 360-degree player role, which HR can play in order to solve the problems aspects of the future.
Yeah, that's a perfect kind of launch point for my next question as well. We're always told the world is our oyster, but for HR professionals right now, it really is feeling like that. And Meena, I'm interested in understanding in your career, with your wealth of experience, what is the one area of business or like the day-to-day that has HR involvement now, but looking back, you were actually quite surprised in terms of the value that HR could bring to that particular aspect of work and business strategy or the landscape?
I would say two of them, to be very candid. The more I thought about it, I said I can't stop with one. The first one is more around how there is active partnership between the business and HR today, from the credibility HR has earned through its work, depth of knowledge and interaction with the business to be earning a seat at the table. I think there's a huge shift that I'm seeing since the time I began my career. And the second one is the way we have started building teams. The concept of mentorship was always there, but I think we are capitalizing on both mentorship and, like Aravind said, coaching as two strong levers to people development, whether it is within the the HR teams or whether it is building business teams also. I think both of these are very strategic elements that have come a long way since 20 years ago, if I were to put it, and truly very, very happy to see this shift of needle.
No, absolutely. I think you'll find a lot of people sort of echoing that surprise and that sentiment. It's a pleasant surprise, right? Because you just realize how much value and potential there is to this one particular role, which is human resources. And taking from that, once again, Aravind, if I were to bring you back into the conversation at this point, to get your thoughts on how you think HR professionals themselves need to evolve, right? Because I think there is this sense that the world is changing so quickly that the professionals within it, are also finding themselves having to keep up with that evolution, right? So what would you recommend from a skills or maybe a collaboration perspective, right, that HR professionals need to really think about seriously so they can stay with the times and move?
I know I have to steal Meena's ideas here, but most important piece, which I feel is basically in terms of URC, upskilling, reskilling, and cross-skilling. Because as an HR leader, you cannot say that I understand only the business part. I was reading one of the recent HBR posts this morning. They are saying about super tech leaders. Super tech leaders are people who don't just say that I only know architecture, I only know security. They are expecting to compete or to outshine your AI. You got to know anything and everything which AI is doing and supporting the business. Number one. Number two, as an HR, you got to see value, impact, and contribution through your words, action, and thought. And that's where impactful deliverables really makes a difference. When you speak to a leader or an HR person, it's not about health and recreation anymore. It's how do you really bring in value, impact, and contribution in whatever you do it. And no more, it's something to do with your doables, which comes in the form of your job description. And that's where HR really creates an impact. And as an HR profession, we should never stop learning and always do that same concept of learning, unlearning, and relearning. Because now it's not competing with anyone, it's competing with machines. So if you have to do that, you've got to really do this art of learning, unlearning, and relearning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially the last part, again, on greytFM, we've had so many conversations about how AI and technology are really impacting the business of HR, right?
Absolutely.
I also do want to, look at the flip side, Jitender, and get your opinion on what are some of the systemic issues that you believe are, really plaguing the world of HR. Are there things, mindsets, approaches that you feel we have not completely eradicated that we should as soon as possible, things that you just believe need to go ASAP?
Great question, Ahalya. And I think there are still some areas of lag. There are certain gaps, that we need to solve for, in the community. Personally, if I look at my experience, number one would be, the stereotyped version of HR being non-responsive. This is something that we often hear on social media. We often hear from candidates, we often hear from people and employees in the organization that whenever it comes to responsiveness, right, HR as a function lags a lot behind. So this is a stereotype which I believe, is a big problem to solve, because it's not just about perception, right? It's about the brand of the profession. It's about the brand of the community. And I do believe that, yes, while there are some people or contextual challenges to it, it's a widespread problem. And I've experienced it, as a consultant when I was on the other side of the table. It does happen that a lot of HR systems and professionals are less responsive, or I would say non-responsive. So many times we choose to delay responding rather than, let's say, saying a no upfront. So I believe non-responsiveness, is a very, very big problem area for the community that needs to be solved.
A very valid point that you've just brought up, Jitender. So, Meena, now to bring you back into the conversation, also asking you about maybe your past year in HR, what would you say have been kind of the biggest wins for the fraternity? I think in observance like, HR Professionals Day really allows us the chance to reflect on some of our small and big wins, right? So, over to you.
I think there have been a couple of major shifts. While we have been thinking about data, we have used data in parts in the last 10 years. I think in particular, the last year, I think there's been a lot of conversation of how HR can really value data driven decisions. And when I say HR, how that is impacting the business. So I think this is one major shift, one major insight, one major learning that has put HR in a place where we really need to understand data much deeper. What are the interconnects in an organization? Where is the data streaming from? How are they talking to each other? And as a result of all the information that we have at hand, are we using that to really make insightful and impactful decisions? I would say that is something that I'm enjoying thoroughly. Coming from a science background, logic has always played a major part in much of what I have done,
Right.
even if it is in HR. So I think that's one takeaway for me, Ahalya.
Again, a very unique insight, Meena, and also one that I think allows us to reflect on the exciting brink that we're at, right? It's going to just keep on unfolding into a very exciting time. And I think we're all sort of looking forward, no matter how senior or how junior we are, right, moving into the world of HR, to see how this is all going to sort of play out. Aravind, if I could also ask you as a follow-on, again, a day like this, an observance like this is a good time to reflect on where we need to improve and step up our game, right? So what would you say have been our biggest losses or our biggest areas of learning in the past year or so?
Just a reflection again, the whole HR scenario, the playground, it's taking new shape after the so-called arrivals of the MLs, DLs and all those things. But I always feel at the end, and this is one of the frameworks which I'm working at this point of time, whatever it is, you cannot give three things to a machine. One is your imagination, another is your curiosity and empathy. I think ICE is something which you should not forget it, because world needs kind leaders, people who can bring in something called empathy and compassion. If you look back to our leaders, or probably the best of the best HR minds and leaders, or something which really requires, leapfrog kind of thinking, or a radical thinking, or a disruptive thinking, that only comes from imagination. And that only comes from curiosity. And curiosity, if you start giving it to by the word called prompt to your systems, where are you using a so-called creative mind? That's something which is very important. And at the end, be human. I don't have any qualms about AI, but don't leave curiosity and imagination to the tool. Because at the end, you see any versions of ChatGPT in the future, whatever is going to come, it's only because someone has really imagined, someone has put in a lot of thought process, someone has questioned why and why not. And I think if you stop there, I don't know what is going to happen. That's my few reflections on this.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it'll be quite ironic if we do outsource the human resources to the machines, right? I don't even see a world in which that's entirely possible, or at least, like you said, the great stuff that comes out of that connection, right, in the workplace is probably one that is fit for human beings. So, so we've very quickly reached the end of the podcast. I also want to take a moment at this point to really wish all of you a very happy HR Professionals Day, and thank you so much for joining us. But if I could let you go, with just one question, I think it would be, and I think HR is ridden with myths and misgivings from the world outside, right? Like I said, when I was in college, I was introduced to it with the idea that it's just this really boring administrative thing. And the more I have explored it, the more I've realized it's almost the complete opposite, right? So I want to ask each of you if there's a relentless myth about HR professionals that you really like to bust right now, one that has followed you throughout your careers, and you find yourself still at this point in time telling people, hey, you got it wrong. Meena, if you want to go first.
Yeah, but even before I get there, I'd like to add to what Aravind said, which is very, very important for us to kind of put it out there. I think it's important for us to hit the pause button very often. It's important to do some deep work, deep dive in whatever we are doing. And more than anything, mindfulness is no longer a myth or a fad. It is so important for us to take those small, big breaks, 2-minute meditation, 1-minute meditation, and make sure that you're completely aware and in the present. That is what is going to be the biggest driver for HR in terms of the capability, as far as both, I think, Aravind and I see. And coming to your question, it's absolutely brilliant that we are thinking about how HR has little responsibility beyond administration and bureaucracy. This is something I have heard over the years, not anymore, but it used to leave me very stifled and shocked, because I think we play a very responsible role in chartering the careers of hundreds and thousands of people who are engaging with us throughout our lifetime. It's not even once or twice in a day, but it's over a lifetime that we're able to, kind of develop capabilities, identify the potential people have, and make sure that it is really, they are there at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. I think that cross of responsibility that we carry is for a lifetime. And I would like to call it loud and clear that we are beyond administration, we are beyond bureaucracy, and there's much more meaningful things that we are giving back to the organizations that we are part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you pointed out right in the beginning, what you're giving back is also critical roles like a VP of, a particular vertical within the company. So absolutely agree with you there, Meena. Aravind, what about you? Is there one, myth that sort of has followed you always that really troubles you or even just irks you?
I'll just give you some statements. One is basically in terms of someone saying, it's something an HR's job. There's a fantastic book I would recommend all my leaders to read, The Power to Middle. I always feel somehow thinks HR is a facilitator. Sometimes HR is a coach, but please don't say HR as an administrator because HR's role has been evolving. Now, let's assume we don't talk about performance appraisal. We don't talk about performance when we say performance coaching. That's where HR has to move from doables to deliverables. Everyone says, oh, that is HR's job. I think somewhere we have to say stop and then say that no, it is not. And you as a leader, we will be facilitating because career development, it is HR's job. Succession planning, it's career job. No, it is. As a leader, you do only three things: leadership, change, and impact. And that's what we should be looking at. So I think that's what my 2 cents are for this piece, Alya.
Okay, I think throw it back to people to think about for a minute. Would like to ask you as well, Jitender, is there one that follows you a lot as an HR professional, as a CHRO now, that you would really like people to just leave behind, leave in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. There are quite a few myths. While I'll start with the first one, because that's more closer to the question, is that HR is not just about birthday cakes, and HR is not just about rangolis, and HR is not just about, these parties. I think somewhere HR professionals and community have also been a culprit, in creating that perception and promoting that perception. HR is far, far beyond. And I think somewhere we have not been able to define the strategic aspect of what an employee engagement is, the strategic aspect of the kind of interventions we take. And somehow we have not been able to, sell this well to the external world. And hence the perception stays with them and it keeps on getting promoted. So that's one myth that I would want to break. There's another aspect which I would want to call out is, it's not a myth that a lot of people have this stereotype. It's a perception, I would say. Perception that aap log kya karte ho? We keep hearing about all this. And I think somewhere, people also need to be educated, including business leaders and stakeholders around, what HR really does. And I think that's where HR leadership comes into picture, wherein, they have to take a very courageous and a bold call in terms of making people aware by presenting business cases, by sharing metrics, being part of, group wherein they can voice out that this is what is the real value that HR brings to the table. And I think once you start doing all this, I believe the perception and the stereotyping, that has happened for all these years and now continues to happen will slowly kind of, fade away.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we've kind of, given platform for the amplification of their voice. And I think a lot of us, it's a good one, actually, Jitender, a lot of us are looking forward to that day where this myth ceases to exist, right? I have to thank all of you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure having you on this podcast. And like I said, wishing you a very happy HR Professionals Day. So glad we could use this platform to really recognize all of your amazing work and insights as well.
Thank you, Ahalya.
Thank you, Ahalya.
All right, everyone, stay tuned to our series. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Did something a little bit different, multiple voices, diverse thoughts. Hope to bring you so much more content in the future. And like I said, HR is an evolving world. There's going to be so much to talk about. So I don't see us stopping anytime soon. Stay safe and stay happy. We'll catch you in a bit.
This is greytFM, a podcast series by greytHR. Produced by Timber Media.